Welcome back to Trucking in the Seven Seas. This is episode number 118, and in this episode, we're going to go over week 10 and 11 of running Amazon Relay. In this episode, we take a long load out to Kenosha, Wisconsin, before running a block in Minneapolis. If you're new to this channel, welcome. My name is Tim, and I started this channel in order to show exactly what truck drivers make. I started as a company driver, working for Night Transportation, moved on to a lease operator, working for Night Transportation, then an owner-operator leased on the Landstar, and now we are an owner-operator running our own authority. I show all of the loads I take, what the revenue is, what the expenses are, and what my net cash flow is, and I compile all this information that I put into a spreadsheet that I share with you at the end of every video. So if this is a topic that interests you, follow the channel. But last episode, we left off in Fontana, California, so I was running a block for Amazon out of Las Vegas, hit some serious wind in Fontana, and canceled the block due to weather considerations. It did not affect my rating, so that's good. Whenever there is a National Weather Service alert in effect in your area, apparently you can cancel the block and there are no consequences, so that was good. Following the cancellation of that block, I did take my truck in to have the transmission looked at by a Freightliner dealership out there. It was starting to get a little more audible and it was a little bit concerning, so I brought it in, and the technician at the Freightliner shop there couldn't find anything, and he basically said that if I wanted to continue further, he would have to drop the transmission, and it would have cost me like $3,000, and I just wasn't going to do that for basically an issue that wasn't causing any real problems. It was just a little bit more audible, and it was becoming a little bit concerning, but if he couldn't find anything, then I wasn't going to have him drop the transmission. So with that said, after we canceled the block, got the transmission looked at, I decided pretty much that it was time to head to the Midwest at this point. So I was looking around and trying to find a load anywhere in the region, going to anywhere basically in the Midwest. So I was looking around and I ended up finding this load right here. Yep, so pretty standard. A lot of the loads going to the Midwest, I did notice, were coming out of Las Vegas for whatever reason. They weren't coming out of Phoenix. They weren't coming out of Fontana. They were coming out of Las Vegas, which is fine by me. And this has been pretty consistent over the last couple of months that I was monitoring it. Basically, every load going to the Midwest was coming out of Vegas. So, okay, whatever. In this instance, it was Las Vegas, Nevada to Kenosha, Wisconsin. 1,800 loaded miles, 242 empty miles. Paid $4,400 at $249 per mile. Yeah, and this is pretty consistently what I was seeing coming out of Las Vegas. Basically going from Las Vegas to Kenosha, or maybe Indianapolis or St. Louis or something like that. Sometimes Minneapolis, but I couldn't find any that particular day. But this was pretty consistent. They were all paying about $250 per mile coming out of Las Vegas. So I was like, okay. It is noteworthy though that I think it was like 2 days before this or something like that is when oil prices really started to explode, because the Middle East was also exploding, coincidentally. So $249 per mile, but I kind of recognized that as I was going to go over there, the fuel prices were going to get progressively more expensive. And as you'll see in the spreadsheet, they did. But it is what it is. This is what I booked. So we grabbed a load out of Las Vegas, Nevada, and now we are headed to Kenosha, Wisconsin. Let's go. Okay, so we dropped that load out in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Went pretty smoothly. I did end up taking the Rockies with this load, whereas normally I would just detour over to the 80. But the problem was the 80 in Wisconsin, or excuse me, in Wyoming, was ripping wind. So I decided to go ahead and go through the Rockies, and it went fine. There was like an hour or two when I woke up one morning where chains were required. I just sat it out because I'm not chaining if I don't have to. So that happened, but other than that, went through the Rockies, dropped it in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and then we were good to go, except for the fact that there was a major winter storm that was going to hit pretty much all of the Midwest. Yeah, so the storm was going to hit Minneapolis, Wisconsin, all of Wisconsin, a lot of Iowa, a lot of Indiana, all of Michigan, parts of Ohio as well. So it was pretty much going to just clobber the entire Midwest. And that put me in a bit of an awkward spot because I did book a block it was Thursday when I booked a block for the following week on Thursday, and I dropped this load in Kenosha on Friday. So I had about 6 days to get to Minneapolis basically, or I was going to have to cancel the block, which I did not want to have to do. So it put me in a very awkward situation where I needed to find basically a drop-in hook, I needed to basically get a load over to Minneapolis and just drop a trailer in Minneapolis and not have to like bring it back to do a load out back to where it came from or anything like that. And it was a Friday when I dropped this load, and then I needed to get immediately to Minneapolis. And the problem was the storm was going to hit, and pretty much I knew how bad it was going to be, and it was going to take me a few days to get up to Minneapolis if I let this storm pass me first. So what I decided to do, the storm was coming west to east, so it was going to hit Minneapolis first, and then it was going to keep coming across Wisconsin and then hit Chicago and the Kenosha area. So I couldn't find anything that day, and it didn't look like I was going to find anything. So I decided there weren't a lot of good options here, and what I decided to do, I just deadheaded to Minneapolis, bobtail really. Not something I was planning on doing, but given the storm was coming and I needed to kind of get into the storm, let the storm pass, the roads would be pretty much clear at that point, and then I could take the block. This led me to actually bobtail to Minneapolis, which I did not want to have to do. I didn't love that decision, but it seemed like the best decision at the time because I did not want to have to cancel the block and destroy my Amazon rating. So that's what I ended up doing. So after Kenosha happened, got to Minneapolis. The storm came and blew through Minneapolis. I was parked though, so I didn't have to deal with it. And that's why I wanted to go to Minneapolis, let the storm pass, and then, just let it pass and then start hauling. So that's what I ended up doing. Went to Minneapolis and then waited it out. And that's what happened for a couple of days there. Yeah, so the storm passed, and it was, I think, Tuesday when things finally cleared up reasonably well. And I was looking around trying to find some local runs, just power only local runs around Minneapolis, but I couldn't find a whole lot, so I ended up pretty much sitting for like 3 days, more than 3 days. It was about 3 days I ended up sitting just kind of up in Minneapolis, just waiting for the storm to pass and waiting for my block to come. So that's what I ended up doing, and the block, which is, I guess I'll put it right here. Yeah, so this block had 15 stops, but a couple of them were canceled. So just to go through the ones I did, the first one I picked it up and I'm reading off my computer, which is right there, which is why I'm not looking at the camera. But picked the first one up in Lakeville, Minnesota, and then I dropped it off in Little Canada, Minnesota. That was just an empty move. And then in Little Canada, Minnesota, I picked up a loaded, and then went to DeKalb, Illinois, dropped it there. And then after the DeKalb, Illinois load, I picked one up at the same facility, and then I went to Crest Hill, Illinois, just a few miles down the road. After I dropped the load in Crest Hill, Illinois, I then went back to Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. So I just dropped and hooked at the same facility and went back to Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, I then went to Maple Grove, Minnesota, just a local run there. And then from Maple Grove, Minnesota, went to Shakopee, Minnesota. And then from Shakopee, Minnesota, I went back to Lakeville, Minnesota. Yeah, so to oversimplify things, I went from Minneapolis to the outskirts of Chicago, back to Minneapolis, and there were a couple of local runs at each point in the block there. And in total, it was 946 loaded miles, 429 empty miles, paid $2,400 at $2.59 per mile.
Sorry to bother you, man. Is it possible to move a little further? I can park at the back.
Yeah, you can park. You can park there. A guy was able to get in there a few minutes ago.
He was out of the line, so I was like,
Oh, okay, yeah.
just a little bit, man.
Sure.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Sorry
Yep.
about
You're good. Okay, I had to move my parking spot to a more desirable bobtail parking spot, so that's why the scenery's changed here. Anyways, so long story short, the block ended up going from Minneapolis to Crest Hill, Illinois, which is the outskirts of Chicago, and then back to Minneapolis with a couple stops in between each location there. So that was basically it. And in total, the loaded miles were 946, empty miles were 429, paid $2,446 at $2.59 per mile. Yeah, so that ended up being the run. Pretty decent in my opinion. That's a very flat, easy route. Mileage was a little bit high because of all the deadhead I had to do, but that won't happen every time. And 946 miles. Okay, that's fine as well. So that's what we ended up doing. Grabbed a load in Minneapolis, went to Crest Hill, and then back to Minneapolis. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so we dropped that block out in Minneapolis, and that was actually the last block we were able to get in that week, and it was the only block we were able to get in that week. We did book another series of blocks for the following week, or this week as I'm filming it, but those blocks are not going to hit this paycheck, so we're going to go ahead and get into the spreadsheet right now. Okay, so as discussed, we're going to cover week 10 and 11. Let's do it. For week 10, we did one load. In that one load, we got 2,043 miles. Paid a total of $4,400 at $2.19 per mile. Fuel expense, we fueled up 4 times. In those 4 times, we paid $1,595 at 78 cents per mile. Maintenance expenses, we had our transmission check and advise for $393 at 19 cents per mile. Other expenses, scales $14, tools $197 for a total of $211 at 10 cents per mile. Fixed costs, our APU payment came in at $418. Our ELD payment came in at $39 for a total of $457 at 22 cents per mile. All right, totals for week 10. Total expenses were $2,657 at $1.30 per mile. Total revenue was $4,400 at $2.19 per mile. That brought our net settlement to $1,800 at 89 cents per mile. All right, caveats for week 10, just basic stuff here. Took the one long load, and then as already mentioned, I hit a storm. Wasn't able to get anything else in, and the canceled block didn't really pay anything at all, so that sucked. And yeah, that was pretty much it. Just Las Vegas to Kenosha, 2,000 miles basically, and that's all we did. However, on the way there, as already mentioned, the fuel prices, well, they started to basically, they went up like a SpaceX rocket. I mean, they just started going up as I was leaving. I think they were already going up when I was in Nevada. Yeah, they were already starting to go up in Nevada. So that's like, I know, what is that? Let's look at, what's that price per gallon right there? 602 divide 127 equals 474 per gallon. So in Nevada, I paid 474 per gallon for that fuel up. So that was already starting to hurt. And these ones aren't much better. So basically, I left, the prices were already really starting to rise, and as I kept going, they kept going higher and higher. So yeah, the fuel price is 78 cents a gallon, and that's a little bit high. I think this Nevada fuel up was part of the reason there. But that's, given current fuel prices right now, I'm at another Quick Trip, and it's $4.99 a gallon before my discount. So that's not too high given current prices. Actually, I think it's a little bit high, but yeah, basically fuel prices are through the roof right now, and there's nothing I can do about that. So that's a big caveat there. Ouchies. And I did not have fuel protection on this because it was just a spot load, so I just ate that. And then, as mentioned, I did do the transmission check and advise. They did not find anything, so that's that. I'm not going to have them rip out the transmission to maybe or maybe not find a problem. And at this point, I'm pretty much just going to keep rolling with it. If it blows up, that's when I'll fix it, right? That's pretty much my attitude. It's making a little bit more noise than I thought it used to, and that's about it. It could also be that because I started running more blocks with Amazon, I'm doing more local city running, so there's a lot more shifting going on, and maybe that's why I'm hearing it more because there's just more shifting going on. Whereas when I was running the spot market last year, I was doing, less city driving, so that could also be it. But it's working. It's shifting just fine. It's just making a little bit more noise, and that's all we're going to do. All right, and then other stuff here. I bought some tools. I think, when I was going through Colorado, I decided to get some of the really good spider web chain holder things in case I needed them. Didn't end up using them, but I did buy some. I had some in here, but they were pretty low quality ones. So I decided to get a good pair. So that's what that is. And then, yeah, APU payment came in. OmniTrax came in. Pretty standard stuff. for basically a total of $1,800.89 per mile. Okay, that's week 10. Could have been worse, could have been better, but there's that. So let's go ahead and move on to week 11. All right, for week 11, we did one block. In that one block, we drove a total of 1,300 miles, paid a total of $2,446 at $1.78 per mile. Fuel expense, fueled up 2 times. In those 2 times, we paid $981 at 71 cents per mile. Maintenance expense, we changed out a steer tire for $561 at 41 cents per mile. Other expenses, tools, we paid a total of $396 at 29 cents per mile. Fixed costs, there were none. All right, totals for week 11. Total expenses were $1,900 at $1.41 per mile. Total revenue was $2,400 at $1.78 per mile. That brought our net settlement to $507 at 37 cents per mile. All right, yeah, there's week 11. So one block, that was it. That's all I could fit in. It originally was booked for $1,773, I think was the amount. So basically, I ended up getting about $700 worth of fuel surcharge, plus tolls, because there were some tolls in Illinois that I ran through, and that's about right. So I did the backwards math on the fuel surcharge at this point. When I was in Vegas, I did the math, and the fuel surcharge was 42 cents per mile on the block I ran out there. And then I came out here, and by the time I got out here, the fuel surcharge was 62 cents per mile. So it basically is about a 50% increase in the price of fuel. So that is okay. That's what it is. Thankfully, the blocks have fuel surcharge, so it doesn't actually affect me, and it's a good time to be running them. But there's that. And yeah, I mean, just speaking on the fuel here, 71 cents per mile. Yeah, that's about right. I mean, so I'm a little bit high on my fuel bill right now, but that could have been just like maybe I think I'm like 3/4 full at the end of the week or something like that. So that's about right. I think I'm going to end up spending somewhere between 60 and 70 cents per gallon at these prices. My truck gets 8 miles a gallon recently with these loads, because the block loads, the Amazon loads tend to be pretty light, and it's perfectly flat out here. So I'm guessing I'm going to get just shy of 8 miles a gallon if I'm paying about $4.50 a gallon, which is about what this adds up to. About 60 or 70 cents per mile, which is about what the fuel surcharge is. So there's that. Yeah, and then maintenance, steer tire change. So as I was doing one of those talking videos, just weekly, just kind of semi-weekly update videos, you guys started commenting that it looked like my steering wheel was vibrating a little bit. And I'm glad you commented that, because I thought it was starting to vibrate more. But you know how it's hard to tell sometimes when something slowly starts getting worse and worse and worse, just like a boiling frog sort of thing. I thought my steering wheel was starting to vibrate a little more. I thought things were starting to vibrate here a little bit more, but I wasn't sure because it was happening slowly. And then you guys commented that, and I'm like, yeah, I got a vibration issue. Brought it into the truck stop, and then the mechanic looked at one of my tires, and it was not circumferential. Basically, the tire, poor quality tire. I bought like some off-brand like 8 months ago or something like that, and over time, it was just a poorly manufactured tire. It looks like, and it was no longer circumferential, which was causing the vibration. He couldn't find anything. He looked at it, but he couldn't find anything other than the tire. And ever since I bought that tire, I don't know. It's been weird. I've been looking at the tire, and it was such an off-brand tire. I'm like, man, I don't know about that one. As soon as I put it on, I started like questioning my decision, and I'm pretty sure it was just the tire. I don't think it was an alignment issue. I don't even think it was out of balance. I think it was just a tire. So we'll see. The alignment machine was broken. The alignment machine seems to always be broken at these truck stops. So I could not get an alignment done, but I'm pretty sure it's just a tire. So anyways, I put a new tire on there, long story short, and the vibration has stopped. So we'll see if it comes back. If it comes back, well, I'll have to address it with something else. But yeah, and tools and others. So I ended up buying new cables for the semi-truck. So the electrical cable and the airline cables, I just bought a new set. Mine were getting pretty old. They were still functioning fine. I kept them just in case, but I decided to go ahead and buy a new set because mine were getting pretty old and ruggedy. So I did that, and then I had this brain blast moment as I was driving to Wisconsin. So I thought I had my air dryer replaced in October at the Freightliner, because when I brought it into the Freightliner, I thought they replaced the air dryer for me. It's one of those things. I just brought it into the Freightliner. They had the part, so yeah, replace the air dryer. Um, but then I just had this brain blast moment. I don't remember checking back in October if they actually did it, and I was like, wait a minute, maybe they just didn't replace the air dryer back in October at the Freightliner, and that could have been what's been causing some of the noise with the transmission. So I undid it. I just replaced it myself, right? I mean, it's super easy to do. I'm just like, when I brought it into the Freightliner, they had the part. I was dropping it off to go see some family. So I just dropped off the truck. I'm like, hey, put a new air dryer in there while you're in there. Then I'll charge extra for that kind of thing because it takes 5 minutes. Long story short, air dryer was super old. So I thought they replaced it. I didn't check their work, and they didn't replace it. I opened it up and it was disgusting. So I put a new air dryer on there. Transmission, I don't know if it's got quieter since then or not, but that could have actually been the issue. Yeah, some of you guys were saying, Nick, did you replace the air dryer? And I went, yeah, I did. October. Thinking, just like, actually, no, I didn't, because the Freightliner didn't do it. So I was like, oh, crap, okay. So, not blaming the Freightliner. I should have checked to make sure they did it, but it looks like, no, they did not do it, and that could have actually been the transmission noise I was hearing, which would be great. I think it's gotten quieter, but it might be confirmation bias. Anyways, there's also an air dryer in there as well, that I threw on there. So that's that. That's why the bill is so high. So new cables and a new air dryer. So there you go. All right, yeah. Then fixed costs. Nothing came in. I do have my insurance payment coming in next week, so $1,800. So that'll be coming in. But this week, nothing. All right, yeah. And then overall, short week. I only did one block for like $2,000, and the fuel prices are super high. So super short week, not typical, but that's week 11. So let's go ahead and move on to the overalls now. All right, totals for 2026. We have driven a total of 12,000 miles. Total expenses has been $20,000 at $1.61 per mile, and that is my cost per mile. Total revenue has been $25,000 at $1.96 per mile. That brings our total profit loss to $4,500 at 35 cents per mile, and all of these loads are dry van. Okay, yeah, there's a total so far. I am not going to go over the averages and other information because there is not enough data to really give any useful information, so we're not going to do that at the moment. Once I get a few more weeks in here, we'll start going over that. However, for the totals at the moment, sample size is too small, I would say. So right now, not much to say. I took a bunch of time off in January and February, so there's not much data here at all. Looking at things, honestly, it's just too early to make any conclusions. I've only been hauling a couple of runs, a couple of blocks for Amazon, so going to keep doing them. Going to keep getting a larger data set so we can have a better idea here. So far, though, things seem to be okay. I mean, looking at this block up here, $259, $2,400 with the fuel surcharge protection, and that was not a very high paying block. So when I book the blocks on an individual basis, so if I book one block, say it starts at 06, like, okay, I want to start at 06 on Monday next week. So I book a 06 block on Monday next week. Those blocks don't typically pay as much. They don't pay all that great. I did book this one right here in Minneapolis, just because, okay, I'll just book one and then get over there and run it, which is what I did. However, if you book an entire week worth of blocks for Amazon and you tell them, hey, I'll run whenever you want, it pays better. So I booked an entire week of blocks this week as I am filming this, and it paid $2,000 per block. So instead of $1,700, it paid $2,000. So it pays better. Now my plan at the moment is to book 1 week of blocks where I just run whenever Amazon tells me to run, basically. And then the following week, I'll probably choose 1 or 2 blocks, depending on how the schedule works out, that I just choose myself. This will avoid any conflict with Amazon because, hold on, I got a radio going off here. Because if I were to book 2-week blocks in a row, Amazon could, in theory, violate my hours of service by running me like 12 days in a row or something like that. This is possible. So I want to avoid that, and I want to avoid canceling an entire week of blocks. So I've decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to run basically a Amazon week-long block that pays pretty good, and then the following week I will book 1 or 2 blocks, depending on how the schedule works out, just off of the load board that pays a little bit less. And this will avoid any conflict with my hours of service. So that is my plan, and we'll see how it goes. And just looking at these numbers, I'm optimistic. I think this could work out okay, and it could offer some pretty good work-life balance while allowing me to kind of bobtail around, which is very nice to be able to use this just to bobtail to Planet Fitness or whatnot. So that's where we're at. Gonna keep at it, and I'm looking forward to this year and running these blocks because they seem to pay okay. Yeah, but that'll pretty much do it for this episode, guys. Just an update of week 11 and week 10. Not much to show, just one block and one load. So that's that. Week 12, I do have an entire week of blocks booked. However, one of them starts on Saturday and ends on Sunday, so it will not hit that same week's paycheck. So I'm going to have 2 blocks on next week's paycheck, and then I think maybe only 2 blocks on the following week's paycheck, depending on what I can book. So we'll see how that goes, but that's pretty much it for this episode, guys. If you're interested in this spreadsheet or any of the other spreadsheets I've done in the past, you can find them in the About section down below. After you find them, just click File, Download, and then you can download them to a Microsoft Excel sheet, and you're free to use them however you please. If you need a factoring company, I use OTR Solutions. They're pretty solid, so there is a link in the About section down below. If you grab your own authority and you need a good factoring company, you might try them out. Please use that link. It does help me out a ton. And if you want to donate to me directly, there is a Buy Me a Coffee link in the About section down below where you can donate whatever you feel appropriate. But that's pretty much it for this episode, guys. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.